Right, so I've come to the Phoenix Park on a fairly wet day to do a quick video discussion about bicycle locks, how useful they are, what works and what doesn't work, and I'm going to bring you through my collection of locks. Okay, so here I have my full range of locks. They're running from, I think this one maybe is about €130. That one's about, this is probably the cheapest, at I think about 30. Weight wise, this is 1.6 kilograms, so that's pretty solid. This is 440 grams. I have 5 locks because I have 3 bikes and also because I live in Dublin. This lock, the really heavy one, actually was also a requirement for insurance for the bike. The insurance is only valid if it's locked with this sort of lock. There's basically a lock certification system, and it has to be a gold standard lock, and it's locked to a metal D-frame. I only kept the insurance for last year, partially because having a bike robbed in the first year would be particularly annoying, but also I actually found in use it was very hard in rural Ireland or small villages to find somewhere that would actually qualify as being properly locked and that I could make an insurance claim on if it was stolen. So the insurance was kind of useful for Dublin, which is also where of course it's most likely to get robbed, but in Dublin I'm very careful with the bike. I generally either don't leave it somewhere for any long period of time, or it's left with multiple locks. So going through the locks, this is a much lighter version of the same thing. It's about 1100 grams. I don't really use it with this bike at all. I use it with the bike I routinely cycle to work. And I have a second lock at the other end, a heavy chain lock. So that bike gets locked with 2 of them. But this one's probably okay. If we think about the difference between them, so this one has got the U or D bit is square, it's got this parabolic shape, and it's made of super hardened steel. All that's designed to make it harder to angle grind. It doesn't mean you can't angle grind it, but it means it probably takes a couple of minutes rather than 30 seconds to get through. It's also got quite a sophisticated locking mechanism. There's a guy who calls himself Lockpick Lawyer on YouTube who does lock picking, and he's an expert. I think it took him about 1 minute and 30 seconds to get into this one, which sounds very short, but in fact that's a very long time in comparison with other locks. So going down through these, my kryptonite here is when I arrived in work one day on the electric bike and realised I'd forgotten to bring the lock with it, this heavy lock, so I quickly went down the bike shop and bought something. I think about €70, about a similar weight in fact to this one. It's a much shorter reach, which means it's only really suitable for locking to D-frames, but there is one of those in work, so that was fine. This one is much lighter, 660 grams. Again, only really suitable for locking to D-frames because it's quite small. I probably wouldn't use it with the electric bike, or at least I haven't used it, but I have a real banger of a bike that's kind of rusted apart and that I use to go to the local shops. That's my 3rd bike, and I use it for that because it's fine. And then finally, this one, which was a bit of an impulse purchase online, I think, because it was very light. It's 440 grams. It's actually quite strong. So like I think if you look at kind of videos of various locks being tested, basically the very cheapest ones, which are those €4 or €5 padlocky or combination locks, or cheap cable locks, or any of those, you can actually pull them apart, particularly if you've 2 people, and you'll see videos of teenagers around Dublin stealing bikes that way by literally just yanking the bikes until the locks fail. And then the other thing you can do is, even with this sort of D-lock, if it's not correctly placed, then it's easy enough to pick the bike up. You can then use the whole entire bike as a lever to break the D-lock. I haven't seen one being done with this in particular, but it wouldn't surprise me if it would be possible with that. Might even be possible with that one. With this one and this one, I don't think that would work because they're much more solid locks. With this, I think it probably wouldn't either because of the way it flexes. However, it's not that hard to defeat at all. You can basically use a rivet gun to shoot out the ends of it. It can be picked. It can certainly be angle grinded. So those are the actual locks. And then I've got two cables here. And this cable is, it's not useless, but you might even manage to cut it with the pliers. You definitely cut it with the bolt cutters. You wouldn't break it by pulling it, so providing whatever I was locking through the ends here was solid enough, it's going to hold. And actually what I use it for is securing the front wheel when I lock the rest of the bike, and that's just to stop the front wheel being casually stolen by teenagers again. And also when I've got all my panniers and things on the bike and I'm visiting a stone circle, I run this through the handles of them so that if some asshole does come along and wants to steal them, they're going to have to wreck them in the process of doing it. That might still happen, hopefully not. This is a much stronger version of the same thing, and specifically would be useful if I was only using one of these small locks or the built-in lock on the back wheel and I wanted to be able to secure it to a pole, because I could use this to actually wrap around the pole. Okay, so starting off, this is the bike. It's about €2,500 worth of bike, so obviously don't want somebody to rob it, but bikes are always getting robbed. So the first lock I'm going to talk about is actually built into it, and this is here, which is a wheel lock, and it basically just locks and unlocks like that. It's not massively sturdy, however these locks do have the big advantage that they're almost impossible to remove by brute force without doing damage to the bike itself. So that means you can't, if you're a bike thief, you can't just jump on the bike and cycle off if it's locked, and if you quickly try and smash the lock off, you're not going to be able to cycle off either, because that's almost certainly going to banjax the back wheel, at least in the process of actually doing it, perhaps damaging the frame. You could pick it, of course, but that bike thieves generally don't pick locks. You might be able to angle grind it off without doing damage. That's kind of tricky though, and it would slow you down. So although it's not a super lock, it's quite effective for what it actually does, and it's certainly good enough to pop into a cafe, get yourself a cup of coffee, come back out to the bike, or pop into a shop quickly, that sort of thing. So for a lot of the rural cycling I do, where you're basically stopping at the side of the road in the village for 2 or 3 minutes to pop into a local shop, it's grand, because basically its primary function could be described as stopping misbehaving teenagers jumping on your bike and cycling off into the sunset. So again, key goes in, this slides back to lock it, slide it down, put the lock in, and basically that's going through the spokes, so it's stopping the back wheel turning, and hard to easily remove without doing considerable damage to the bike. Now of course it's not locked to the frame at all, but what you can do is combine it with the cable lock. So basically key goes in, open the cable lock, run it through the frame, yes, basically slide that in a way that goes to the cable, and now it's also locked to the frame. So that kind of would stop somebody picking up the entire bike and going away with it. Now these bikes are heavy, so you're not going to go far anyway. The cable lock itself wouldn't stop somebody carrying the bike off. However, here I've combined it with a cable which locks it to this frame here. Not the best way to lock it, and you get through that easily with a bolt cutter or of course an angle grinder. But again, for a few minutes it does the job. It would stop somebody picking up the phone in the back of the van. So I came to the park today, both to shoot the video, but also because I want to do a specific additional test for the locks, and that is I'm traveling with a spare battery pack, power bank 500 Bosch. That cost me €600, so it's quite a valuable bit of kit. It weighs 2.6 kilos, so it's also quite heavy as well. And last year, while I was traveling, if I was visiting a stone circle or whatever, I had a pannier that turns into a rucksack, and I'd have this, and I'd have my tent, which is also very valuable, and a couple of other light valuable items in it. I'd turn the pannier into a rucksack, put that in my back, go off, do my sightseeing, come back, right? And that was basically if somebody came along and robbed the other panniers off the bike, which would be a very annoying thing to happen. All they'd actually be robbing is my laundry. So I wouldn't lose much in value. They wouldn't really gain anything. However, carrying this around is a pain in the ass. And then a couple of weeks ago, thinking about it, I had the realization that actually with the locks, I could use the handle on this to lock it with the bike. So let's start with the simplest one. So my standard locking last year was lock the wheel lock, which holds the bike in place, and then get this second really heavy duty one, good, needed for insurance purposes, put that through, and then secure this on the other side. And of course, as you probably have spotted yourself, it's pretty easy to just hang this off the end and add it on. And now not only is the bike locked, but I've just saved myself having to carry around that 2.6 kilos. Question is, will any of my other locks work in exactly the same way? Okay, so let's start with the minimalist option, which is this very light, but maybe strong enough for rural places one, and that will not work simply for that. However, it will work here, and I think will also work there. Okay, so that actually do a reasonably good job of holding the boat bike and battery in place. You can't get this off without cutting the frame or cutting the lock. If you cut the frame, obviously that makes the bike pretty valueless. The lock, as I said, can always be cut. All locks can be defeated, but you're not going to defeat this one with brute strength, i.e. by just yanking on it. And actually, I reckon if you did, that would mess up the bike as well. So you are talking about angle grinding it or using some sort of specialist tool. So in terms of casual theft, that actually works very well, because it means somebody, to rob it, they have to be going around with tools. Now, here's the thing. So I did this poll online, and I asked whether I should be bringing this 1.6 kilo lock or this 440 gram lock to Scotland to cycle around with, and the majority of people went for this one, and I think it's probably the wrong decision, right? And I'm going to explain why. So yes, this lock, much harder to break open, probably take you a couple of minutes with an angle grinder even, very hard to pick. People pick locks, wouldn't be doing that way. Very resistant to other methods like using car jacks to break it open and stuff. You know, if you look up the reviews of this, basically it can take 11 tons of pressure and stuff, so very hard to do it. However, it can be angle ground, right? So it's still talking about 2 minutes maybe you could angle grind to this, depending on how good you are, perhaps faster. I mean, I'm kind of going on those cheap battery angle grinders. So yep, works much stronger. Probably if somebody comes along in 2 minutes and it has 2 minutes, they can angle grind it. This one, much easier to angle grind, I'd imagine. I looked but didn't find any videos of somebody doing it, but given the fact that the metal's much thinner, it's not particularly hardened. If you knew what you were doing, you'd probably attack one of the weak points. So let's say that gets opened in 30 seconds, right? So here's where the difference is between the city and the countryside. In the city, I would use this, because in the city, the bike's locked, there's other bikes locked nearby. The thief is going, do I really want to be angle grinding for 2 minutes? That's going to be quite a lot of noise. Now, they do this, you see the videos all the time, you know, and what you're kind of hoping they'll do is actually they'll go to some other bike that's not as well locked and that they don't have the same problem with. If they're determined, they'll get through it. That's the thing, like, this lock won't hold up to somebody who has the equipment, and the equipment these days, an angle grinder, which you can buy from Lidl every few months for like 30 or 40 quid. That's why they get robbed, right? So yes, much better, but it's not impregnable, right? So let's think about the rural situation, right? Rural situation, I've locked the bike to go and look at a stone circle or to climb a mountain or something else, and somebody's thinking of robbing it, right? So either they have tools, in which case 2 minutes to defeat this, 30 seconds to defeat that. There's a difference there, but if there's nobody around, you know, then probably they don't care that much about it. So that 2 minutes and 30 seconds isn't very important. If they don't have tools, well, they're obviously not going to be able to break this through physical force. There's no way of opening it whatsoever. I don't think that we're going to be able to get through this. That's the important thing, right? I think unless you're equipped with tools to break locks, that's probably going to be good enough, right? And the difference is that I am carrying 1.2 kilos less in weight, which is an absolutely huge difference. That's about the weight of my tent, I think, is 1.3 kilos. My sleeping bag is 600 grams. A bottle of wine is about, well, that's about 750 grams to a kilo, I guess. I poured it into a little plastic thing, so it's nearer the 750. So in other words, there's a down coat I have, big long, well, down to about here, down coat, 600 grams, right? So the amount of weight I save, in other words, is 2 down coats. It's a bottle of wine, it's an additional, it's a bigger sleeping bag, it's thermal underwear, which is 400 grams, been weighing everything. That's a huge difference. So that's the reason why I'm thinking I'm bringing the little lock and not the big lock. Even though the little lock's obviously easier to get through, but it's probably good enough. That's the thing, it's probably good enough. And if somebody comes along and they're determined to rob the bike and they're equipped with the tools, then neither of the locks is good enough. That's my thinking. Of course, a super lightweight option to achieve the same results would be to dispense with a lock, any locks apart from this one and this light cable lock, in which case all I'm going to need to do is run this through, loop it through whatever it is I need to lock on the bike, and then make sure that the jaws on this capture the loop on the bike as well. Okay, so this is the real living dangerous but super light combination, where yes, this is secured. Yes, the bike's secured to that, so you can't just pick it up and throw it in the van. And the bike itself is locked, of course, as well through this. I think this one, although this is only 200 grams, and I'm bringing it anyway, so that would save me another 440. However, I think I'm too chicken for that. And the reason why is that I was referring to tools and somebody needing tools to break either of the other two locks. Well, yes, you're not going to rip this apart with your bare hands. However, I think you could probably get through it. Certainly you could do it if you were strong with a decent pliers or a hacksaw, or certainly even a small bolt cutters. So they're the sort of tools that actually, you know, you could be just casually carrying without even setting out to rob a bike in the first place, and then just go, oh, that's a nice bike, I think I'll cart it off. So although that's the lightest option, I'm a little bit too scared to go for that one. but we shall see. And then my final, I wonder if this might work one, is this light yellow lock. Now this is 660 grams, so it's nearly 50% heavier than that red one. However, I think it's probably better. In that it's harder to defeat by some methods. So you, again, angle grinder, you're through this in 30 seconds or whatever. However, I am a bit nervous about being able to pop out the joining pins on the red lock. So would this one work? And that's really a question of, is there a way of securing it? And I think there is, because I think if I come in and around like this, pop on the battery, and actually that works quite well. So again, bike is secured to thing, battery is also secured as well, and rather fascinatingly, I've just noticed that it looks like somebody has had a go at cutting this sometime quite recently. Wow. So obviously it's probably already proven itself to be good enough for at least some uses. That's quite interesting. I wonder when that happens. Anyway, there we have a whole set of locks and options. I think I've demonstrated that. I have two much lighter ones, either saving 1 kilo or 1.2 kilos, that are worth considering, and I'm just going to have to do a lot of thinking about it. And the thing is, of course, there isn't a right decision except in the sense of the bike doesn't get robbed, and in which case, if it doesn't get robbed, whichever lock it doesn't get robbed with was the adequate lock that did the job. But yeah, we'll have to see, and I'm quite curious now as to what the hell happened to this lock, because that definitely looks like somebody had a go at cutting it. But yes, onward to Scotland, and we'll find out which one worked. I'm definitely going for one of the two lighter ones though. The idea of saving, 1.2 kilos to 980 grams, depending on which one of those two, that's a lot of weight. And the thing is, cycling the bike with the extra weight is one thing. That's not that big a deal. Bike's about 20 kilos. I'm 77 kilos at the moment, I think. And then you've got probably 8 to 10 kilos of luggage anyway. So, one lock over the other is only adding 1 or 2%. Now, when you're on a lot of big hills in a day, you start to feel that. But actually, the place that matters more is where you have to wrestle the bike on and off, say a beach. Maybe there's steps, maybe it's a narrow entrance, so it's not somewhere you can cycle. Maybe you have to lift it up and down a bit, and then actually 20 plus 30 kilos of luggage, whether that's 30 kilos or 31 kilos, starts to matter a bit. Or actually the other one that it matters quite a bit, if you're camping on a beach and you've moved the bike to where the tent is for security, but the sand's quite soft because it sinks into it and it can be quite hard to move out again. So yeah, it's only 1 kilo, but actually you do feel it.